Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Claire felt the cold bracelet sliding along her wrist as she held her half-full glass of wine. It was her third drink, but she still felt more sober than she wanted to be. The hotel bar was nearly full, but at her table, there was only emptiness, the same emptiness that had been with her for months, maybe years. There was something unsettlingly comforting about being alone there, surrounded by people pretending they had everything under control. Couples talking like they still loved each other, executives flirting with receptionists, waiters smiling out of duty. It was all part of a silent theater. And Claire, at 32, in a dress that deliberately flattered her figure, played the role of the independent, confident, mysterious woman. Only she knew how much of it was an act. While scrolling through her phone, avoiding looking at the clock again, she felt that old unease settle in her chest. Where was Lena? Her friend had never been punctual, but this time felt different. Lena's absence left Claire feeling too exposed, like a shield had been taken away. Together, they'd been unstoppable, partners in crime, confidants, almost sisters. Without Lena, she felt naked. And strangely, that made her senses sharper. She could feel eyes crossing the room, some subtle, some bold. She always knew when she was being watched. And she liked it. It reminded her of who she was before marrying Daniel, before the routine, before having to pretend every day that she was happy with a life that no longer moved her. Her phone lit up with a short message from Lena. Something came up. Sorry. I'll tell you later. Claire dropped the phone onto the table. The vagueness of the message annoyed her. It wasn't just about a girl's night out. It was about the ritual. About the freedom they carved out for themselves on nights like this. Lena's cancellation wasn't just a disappointment, it felt like someone had broken an invisible chain binding them together. Still, Claire didn't leave. She stayed. Because something inside her didn't want to go home. She didn't want to see the couch where Daniel slept with his laptop on his lap. Or the salad plate he'd leave for her in the fridge. All of it suffocated her. With Lena gone, memories filled the silence. Flashbacks of past nights, intense encounters, names she couldn't even remember anymore. Muffled laughter, wrinkled sheets, promises that never existed. Each memory felt like fuel keeping her alive in this double life. For a moment, she thought about leaving. But something held her back. Maybe it was the quiet hope of finding something new, or someone. The approach was subtle. A man, well-dressed, restrained smile, freshly shaved beard. He offered her a drink. Claire hesitated for a second, then accepted. It wasn't a rational decision. It was almost automatic, the kind your body makes when your mind is too tired to fight itself. He introduced himself as Alex. He didn't ask if she was married. He didn't say whether he was. They talked about movies, music, nothing important. And that was enough. Claire wasn't looking for depth. She was looking for distraction. The conversation drifted into flirtation. Flirtation turned to touch. Touch led to an invitation. When he suggested going up to his room, she simply stood and followed him. No guilt. No doubt. The room smelled of woody perfume and expensive linens. She barely had time to look around. The entire world narrowed to those few square meters. The next minutes were raw, unfiltered intensity. No questions. No breaks. A physical release, a private revenge against everything she'd buried for so long. When silence settled over the room, Claire rolled onto her side and closed her eyes. Not to sleep, to hold on to whatever was left of herself. Her heart pounded hard, not from passion, but from fear of what would come next. Still, she tried to rest. Pretended this night was like any other. That nothing had changed. That it was just another story. Another body. Another secret. What she didn't know was that while she gave herself to the unknown, the world outside the room had already begun to collapse. She woke to morning light streaming through the curtains. The bed beside her was empty. Alex was gone. Or maybe he'd never really been there at all. Claire dressed slowly, reapplied her lipstick, pinned her hair up. It felt like putting on a mask. She walked through the lobby with her usual indifferent expression. But the receptionist avoided her gaze. She noticed, but ignored it. She got in her car, turned on the radio, and drove through the streets as if still numb. Throughout the whole ride, she waited for her phone to vibrate, for Daniel to ask where she was, for Lena to send another message. But the phone stayed silent. Claire didn't know it yet, but that morning's silence would be just the first of many. She still hadn't realized every second of that night had been watched more closely than she ever imagined. She didn't know her ritual of freedom had finally stopped being a secret. As she drove home, a faint smile lingered on her face, a leftover trace of last night's adrenaline. The kind of smile that fades quickly. Much faster than the time it took her to realize the game had changed, and she no longer controlled the rules. Claire had always been a quiet woman. She grew up hearing from her mother that respectable wives kept their eyes down and their lives under control. She married Daniel at 24, enchanted by the way he spoke about the future, the trips, the downtown apartment. At first, everything matched exactly what she'd imagined. But routine came fast. The lack of time, unavoidable obligations, calls interrupted by emails, silent dinners with the TV on. Daniel threw himself into work like he was building an empire, and Claire began to feel like a decorative painting inside her own home, beautiful, but forgotten. She tried to adapt, justifying his absence with phrases she repeated to convince herself, "It's for us, he's exhausted, it'll get better." Time passed, and with it, the warmth of their marriage faded. Conversations became practical, touches grew rare, desire a distant memory. Claire felt herself sinking into a static existence made of duties and appearances. That's when she met Lena. They bumped into each other at a ceramics class, one of those things that seem therapeutic but are really hiding people running away. Lena was the opposite of her, outgoing, direct, unfiltered. She told her stories like recipes, with rich detail and a mocking tone. Over coffee after class, Lena talked about her divorce and how she'd been caught with 2 men at home. Claire froze for a few seconds, unsure how to react. She expected tears, regret. Instead, Lena laughed and said it had been the most liberating day of her life. That intrigued Claire. Not because she wanted to copy her friend, but because she saw something different in Lena's eyes, lightness. There was no guilt there. Just relief. In the following meetings, Lena opened up more. She spoke about apps, secret encounters, how easy it was to keep everything under control with a few simple rules. Claire listened like she was watching a forbidden movie. She laughed, judged, acted scandalized on the outside, but inside, something stirred. A discomfort. A suppressed urge. A desire she didn't even know how to name. One day, Lena suggested going out for a drink. Just to talk, nothing more. Claire agreed. It felt like crossing an invisible line. That night changed everything. She dressed better than usual, did her makeup differently, pinned her hair in a new way. She wanted to see in the mirror a version of herself she'd forgotten. At the bar, Lena was already waiting with a mischievous look. They picked a quiet corner, and around them, men circled like they were scenting opportunity. Lena pointed discreetly, analyzed, described. Claire felt like she was inside a game, and for the first time in a long time, she was excited about something. The first man who approached was a lawyer who claimed he traveled often and lied about being single. Claire noticed, but didn't care. It was part of what she was starting to understand as the rules of the game. They talked a while, laughed, and he lightly touched her hand. She pulled away before anything else happened, but the impact stayed with her for days. She felt desired, alive, powerful. In the weeks that followed, there were more bars, more stories, more experiences. Claire developed a persona for these nights: confident, playful, provocative. She became someone who knew exactly what she wanted, and what she wanted was to escape, even if just for a few hours, from everything that reminded her of her stagnant life with Daniel. Over time, Claire and Lena built a system. Each had her favorite day of the week, her tricks, her limits. They avoided repeating locations, exchanged coded messages, kept a folder with fake names they used. There was even a joke between them: whoever came up with the most absurd story won the next drink. And Claire almost always won. One man cried in the car after saying his wife treated him like a ghost. Another asked to be called by a specific name because he pretended to be someone else to forget his job. There was everything, and Claire collected these encounters like small victories. The truth was, the more she immersed herself in this parallel world, the more she drifted from real life. Daniel kept traveling, managing his business, sending brief messages with copied emojis. He was so absent he didn't notice the change in her eyes, or maybe he chose not to. When they were together, it felt like sharing space out of obligation. Intimacy had become formality. Anniversaries were marked with expensive, empty gifts. The connection they once had turned into mechanical coexistence. One day, watching Daniel pack his suitcase while talking on the phone about a meeting in Philadelphia, Claire realized she no longer felt anger or sadness. She felt relief that he was leaving. That scared her. But at the same time, it confirmed something forming inside her: their marriage was just paperwork, a facade. And even though she'd started cheating, she believed, in her twisted logic, that it was the most honest part of her life. At least during those nights with strangers, she knew exactly what to expect. Nobody promised anything. Nobody demanded love. Nobody asked for attention. Her bond with Lena grew even stronger. They shared confessions, laughed over embarrassing moments, protected each other when things went off script. Lena became her anchor in this new world. There was trust, complicity, even gratitude. And maybe that's why Lena's absence the other night caused such discomfort. Claire felt something was wrong. This break in their ritual left too many gaps that, as she'd soon find out, would become chasms. But until then, wrapped in her bubble of secrets and half-used freedom, she believed everything was under control. That she mastered the rules of the game. That she was smart enough to play with risk without getting caught. The innocence of that belief would be shattered faster than she ever imagined. And with a force no previous night could ever make up for. Back in the present, Claire parked her car hastily in front of the building, still tasting the bad hotel coffee in her mouth. Her tired body couldn't decide if she was more exhausted from the intense night with Alex or from the strange sensation that kept building somewhere between her stomach and her chest. She expected to find the living room dark, blinds half open, the house smelling of lavender, the familiar comfortable silence. But everything felt wrong before she even opened the door. The first thing she noticed was the absence: Daniel's backpack on the floor, his shoes by the entrance, his blazer hanging on the chair. Gone. She stepped inside, scanning the room, hoping to hear a sound from the bedroom or bathroom. Nothing. On the living room table sat a white envelope, no return address, her name written in handwriting she recognized instantly. Claire paused for a few seconds before touching it. Her heart raced, her hands trembling. When she finally opened it, she found a USB drive, a folded sheet of paper, and a lone key. The note didn't have long explanations or open accusations. Just 3 short sentences: enough. You crossed every line. Good luck starting over. The rest of the message contained an online server access code and a list of names, dates, times. Claire felt the ground slip beneath her. She turned on her laptop and typed in the code. Folders opened with surgical precision. Videos dated, images captured by hidden cameras, transcribed audio recordings. She clicked through them, trying to grasp how far it went. She recognized her face, her clothes, her words. Even the moment she touched Alex's hand at the bar was there, recorded from multiple angles. Screenshots of messages sent to lovers, photos with their faces clearly visible, hotel bookings, details of encounters. Even Lena appeared in the background of a few shots, smiling with a glass in hand. The world Claire had built in secret was laid bare before her, documented, undeniable, with no room for denial or excuse. She stood up automatically and reached for her phone. No missed calls from Daniel. No messages. Not even a signal from Lena. Panic washed over Claire like a freezing wave. She ran to the bedroom and opened the closet. Half her clothes were gone. His side. Shoes, watches, documents, all removed. She went to the safe behind the bookshelf. The password no longer worked. She rushed to the kitchen and opened the drawer where they kept their cards. Hers was there. His wasn't. She grabbed her phone and checked her bank app. Account 0. Savings, gone. She tried the brokerage app. Account locked. This wasn't a temporary shock. It was the beginning of a carefully planned demolition. As she struggled to process what was happening, the doorbell rang. Claire opened the door and came face to face with Lena. No makeup, red eyes, trembling hands. Before saying a word, Lena stepped inside as if she might collapse at any moment. She shut the door and, voice cracking, uttered the phrase Claire would spend the rest of her life trying to forget: "Daniel knows everything." Everything. She explained she'd received an anonymous call with instructions. Following them, she found an envelope identical to Claire's, with copies of the same images and videos, but highlighting the moments where she appeared. A short note accompanied it: "Is your reputation worth this?" Claire collapsed onto the kitchen floor. Her legs gave out, her body slumped against the cabinet as if the weight of her own regret outweighed gravity. Lena knelt beside her, trying to calm her. But even Lena's touch now felt strange, as if she'd stopped being an accomplice and become part of the problem. Claire's mind spun in circles, searching for a flaw in Daniel's cruel plan. Had he found out recently, or had he been watching for months, waiting for one bigger mistake, one final confirmation? She remembered a conversation they'd had weeks earlier, when he said he'd bought a new life insurance policy and needed to update their banking details. She remembered how he'd started asking trivial questions about her routine, the places she went, the clothes she wore. Back then, she'd found it odd but ignored it. Now, it all made sense. In the days that followed, consequences multiplied. HR called, demanding she come in urgently. When she arrived, she was led to a private room. The ethics coordinator and the head of HR sat across from her, faces tight with discomfort. On the table lay another envelope, just like the others. Someone had filed a formal complaint, backed by evidence linking her off-hours behavior to the company's image. They tried to stay composed, said they'd review the case impartially, but Claire saw the decision had already been made. She left the building with her head down, feeling curious stares from every direction. Meanwhile, her parents received a letter in the mail, along with printed photos. Her sister, living in another state, messaged saying she didn't know what was true but was disappointed. The pastor from her childhood church called, urging her to meet to talk about repentance. It all felt like a rehearsed orchestra. Every person who could judge her had been brought into the fold. Daniel had anticipated every possible refuge. There was nowhere to run, no one to confide in, nowhere to hide. Privacy had been ripped away, not by impulse, but by strategy. Lena disappeared after that. Sent one final message apologizing, saying she needed distance, that she was trying to salvage what little remained of her own reputation. Claire was alone. She lost her friend, her husband, her job, her money, her respect. She even lost the illusion that she controlled any part of her own life. She spent her days staring at her phone, waiting for a message from Daniel. Anything. An insult. Relief. An explanation. The silence was more painful than any curse. One afternoon, she returned to the hotel where she'd met Alex. Ordered a drink and sat there for hours. Waiting. Nobody approached. Nobody looked twice. She felt like even her aura had changed. The once provocative gaze now carried guilt, exhaustion, weight. And even if she wanted to, she couldn't repeat the past. The game was over. The audience had left. The stage was empty. And there, in that bar where everything had begun to fall apart, Claire finally understood there was no way to pretend nothing had happened. She wasn't just a bored wife anymore. She was the woman who'd been exposed, judged, abandoned. All because of choices that, in the moment, had felt liberating, but were wrapped in silence, adrenaline, and empty promises. Daniel's silence was crueler than any shout. He didn't seek revenge in the heat of the moment, didn't tear clothes or slam doors. He engineered Claire's end with surgical precision, planning every move with the calm of someone who died inside long ago. His absence made more noise than his presence. It was as if he hadn't just taken his belongings from the house, he'd taken the past, the plans, the vows spoken at the altar. Every detail of the dismantling was designed to hollow out her identity completely. The house, once shared, became hostile territory. The mirror reflected a woman unrecognizable, marked by despair, hollow eyes from sleepless nights, an expression shaped by being forced to her knees by her own arrogance. The letter he left with the house sale contract had few words, but each one seemed chosen to wound with precision. He wrote that for years, he'd tried to preserve the dignity of their relationship, believing time would bring back the spark in Claire's eyes. That he'd been wrong thinking it was just a phase. That the empty smiles, rushed dinners, distant touches weren't just signs of routine, they were symptoms of something deeper, the end. He confessed he'd cried alone in airports, hotel rooms, boarding lines, wondering when he'd become a stranger to his own wife. With every paragraph, she recognized a piece of guilt she'd buried in hidden meetings, avoided glances, frayed excuses. He ended by saying there was no anger, only liberation. And that she would finally have the free life she'd always wanted. Alone. Just as she'd wished. The days that followed were filled with lawyer visits, failed attempts to recover any money, unanswered messages, rumors spreading through her building, judging looks in the elevator. The scandal spread through the neighborhood. Some amused themselves by commenting, others pretended ignorance, but the truth lived in whispers and doors that stopped opening. The few friends left slowly drifted away. Nobody wanted to be associated with her name. Claire tried to erase everything about her online, but screenshots were everywhere, videos downloaded, and even if she requested removals, her reputation was already irreparably damaged. The apartment she rented with what little money remained was small and impersonal. Bare walls reflected the emptiness her life had become. She tried finding temporary jobs, but every time her name was searched, opportunities vanished. Interviews ended before they began. Once, she heard the receptionist whisper to the manager that she was the woman from the video scandal. She didn't ask for an explanation. Just grabbed her bag and left. On social media, fake profiles mocked her old posts. Even a clothing store refused her card for security reasons, despite sufficient credit. One night, while washing the few dishes in the sink, the doorbell rang. It was the doorman delivering a small box. Inside, a single photo printed on thick paper. Daniel stood beside a younger woman, smiling softly, peaceful. On the back, handwritten, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters." No signature. Claire held the photo for minutes, unsure what it meant. Was it a taunt? A warning? A farewell? She set it on the table and stood there, motionless. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. There was no room left for drama. The pain had reached a stage that no longer expressed itself with crying, only silence. She began attending anonymous meetings for people who'd gone through public scandals. There, she heard stories of politicians, journalists, former teachers, all ruined by impulsive decisions. Each account was a mirror, and also a cruel reminder that her story had spiraled completely out of control. At one meeting, a woman shared how she rebuilt her life after losing her child and husband following an affair exposed by neighbors. Claire couldn't speak that night. She only listened. For the first time, she understood shame had stopped being a feeling and become an identity. In the months that followed, she sold almost everything she owned: jewelry, bags, designer clothes. Each object was a memory of a life that felt like someone else's. That's when she stopped wearing makeup. She told herself it was for budgeting, but deep down, it was because she no longer saw the point in dressing up. Casual encounters became distant memories. The woman who once wore provocative dresses and fake names in hotel bars now avoided leaving home. Her phone stayed on silent, mostly off. She lost the habit of checking it, waiting for messages. She knew they wouldn't come. One morning, she received an email from a stranger. He said he'd watched all her videos, read every post, and wanted to meet her in person. He promised respect, said he understood her pain, and offered to help her rebuild everything. Claire saw those words as poison. She deleted the email immediately. For the first time, she felt real fear. The kind of exposure she'd endured attracted the worst kind of people, those who didn't see a wounded woman, but a ruined spectacle. An object of curiosity, an easy target to manipulate. That's when she decided to move cities. Took a bus and left without announcing it. Rented a tiny room in a quiet boarding house, started working as a clerk in a small grocery store. The salary barely covered bills, but anonymity was enough. At the register, she served elderly customers paying in coins, children racing off with candy, exhausted mothers counting pennies. Nobody knew her full name. Nobody knew her story. It was like being born again, but without celebration, without flowers, without fanfare. Just a cold, necessary restart. During her shifts, she observed people with new eyes. She saw in theirs what she'd once ignored in herself: loneliness, exhaustion, hidden regrets masked by polite smiles. She began writing short notes in an old notebook, reflections, memories, questions she'd never dared to ask. It was her way of emptying her mind without going mad. One entry read, "The freedom I had was the same that destroyed me." Because being free without awareness is like driving a car without brakes on an unknown road. It feels thrilling at first. But in the end, there's always a wall. Years passed. Daniel moved on and never responded to her attempts to reach out. Lena opened a studio in another city, reinvented herself as a relationship coach, and never sought Claire again. The world kept moving, as it always does. And she, now 37, understood that the price of selfish freedom isn't just losing the people you love, it's losing who you are. Not everyone can rebuild after shattering completely. Some just learn to exist among the pieces. Claire learned it the hardest way possible. And the cruelest irony of all is that, deep down, she never wanted to destroy anything. She just wanted to feel alive again. And she paid for it with her identity, her reputation, her future. The mistake wasn't just betraying Daniel, it was betraying every version of herself that tried to resist. In the end, what remains is silence. And the awareness that everything could have been different if she'd chosen to talk instead of staying quiet, to face things instead of running, to love instead of seeking applause from strangers. Never underestimate the value of someone who truly loves you just because they stop surprising you. Because the comfort of routine sometimes hides the deepest love, the kind you only notice when it's already gone. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.